Welcome, listeners and viewers, to this week's experience of Athletes United on Edge Radio, where truth still matters. I'm your host, Big Mel, and as always, I'm joined by the person known broadly as the athlete. Not just some athlete or by any measure a routine athlete, but the athlete, and none other than the former All-Pro Houston Rockets and two-time World Championship contender, the great Bobby Joe Reed. Sports fans, let's hear it. What's good this morning, Bobby Joe? He's off-site this morning, and he'll be joining us shortly. But this podcast has multiple interests, and chief among those interests, viewers, is health and wellness. I mean, we talk sports, we talk fitness, business, and history. But principally, this show is about health and wellness. Now, it turns out that a significant portion of our health and wellness is oftentimes dictated by our surroundings and circumstance. Where we live, how we live, and to a large degree, the kinds of social duress we contend with daily. So with that as a pretext, I thought it would be interesting and worthwhile to speak with someone who's I'm partial to, who has some clarity and develop thoughts in that area. So, viewers and listeners of Athletes United, please welcome to the platform former outstanding college basketball player, PhD candidate, and progressive social media commentator, our friend Dr. Craig Bardo. How are you this morning, Doc?
Good morning.
Good morning. Are you with us?
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. We're quite flattered to have you on with us this morning. And if you don't mind, we'll just dive right in.
Very good.
First of all, where are you calling from?
Calling from Nashville, Tennessee.
Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
That's sort of something about country music or something of that nature, huh?
Definitely.
That's all right. Well, if you would, give our viewers a little bit about yourself and tell us how your life has been shaped by basketball.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. It's great to be on with men of renown such as yourselves and doing great things. So I appreciate the invitation to be here.
It's our pleasure.
But so basketball, man. So Carbondale, Illinois, and I'm sorry, I'm getting just a little feedback.
I am too, somehow. And we'll fix that probably here at the board, but we'll proceed.
Okay. So in Carbondale, there wasn't much to do in terms of recreation and that kind of thing. So
sure.
It was the thing to do is to play ball, and so I spent hours and hours and hours just watching folks at SIU like Mike Glenn and others play, and so that's what I wanted to do. And I spent a lot of time by myself actually at various courts that I could sweep the gravel off the court and, shoot at those dead rims and that kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
And so anybody that's done this understands that there's a lot of discipline involved in practice and the pursuit of this game at a level that would make you competitive. So, and for me, even though I played at college and had aspirations at one point to play in the league like others that did, but I was really trying to beat Alfonso King, who had a hard time. He would back me down in the paint. Nobody's ever heard of Al King.
I know Al King.
You know Al King.
Oh, yes.
So Al would back me down and laugh at me.
Interesting.
So it took humility, it took a lot of discipline, it took a lot of effort to get better, and then I was blessed with size, something that the rest of us were. So I kind of grew at a certain point, and that helped me. And but basketball is instrumental in my life. And so how did that work? I was also involved in the military. I needed some additional discipline after an initial stint at Indiana where I flunked out of school.
You flunked out of school?
The national tip.
You actually flunked out of school?
I actually flunked out.
That took effort. That took some a concerted effort, if you will.
Yeah, it actually did. You know, you had to work at that. So, I mean, there's a whole story behind that.
Well, I understand. You set your sights on your goal, and you saw an opportunity, and you went for it.
Well, I'm going to tell you, so I didn't graduate from high school on time.
Really?
I failed a course, home ec course or something like that.
Home ec.
That prevented me from graduating. And this is another narrative altogether in terms of
that's very difficult.
In terms of my development.
I understand that. But that was a very difficult academic pursuit, home ec, if you will. I mean, it's quite understandable.
I'll jump right into it. So one of the things that animates me now, so you know, I'm back in school after all these years.
Sure.
One of the things that animates me was my experiences. My experiences in school. And that a lot in the present moment that we're undergoing is informed by my experiences as well. And I'm just going to call it what it is. I had most of my teachers were white women.
As were most of us.
I felt alienated from school.
Wow.
Completely alienated by school, and it wasn't because I didn't have the ability or the or even the discipline, because I had all of that. I mean, that was basketball, but with respect to school, I had what I consider to be a nightmare experience with white women in Illinois.
That must have been a point of contention at home from time to time.
It was absolutely, my father, Dr. Bardo,
Yes.
Dr. Harold Bardo,
Yes.
University professor. My mother was the smartest one in the family. She was valedictorian in her high school class, all that kind of thing. So, yeah, they understood what I was going through, but they're not very sympathetic at that point.
It's like, don't give us any excuses. Get up off of it and let's get it done.
Well, that was understandably how they approached it, but it was just a big challenge for me. So going into Indiana, I wasn't a very disciplined student. I wasn't the guy that was gonna go to practice and then go back and try to get the homework done and all that kind of stuff. So it was a big challenge for me to be at Indiana national championship team, playing against Isaiah every day.
Wow.
That
was a challenge in and of itself. That was a separate challenge.
In and of itself. Even with guys that I was tasked with defending every day in practice and trying to score against. So it was a physical challenge, it was a mental challenge, and I wasn't really up at that point to doing both things, right? So it doesn't sound very promising at this point, right?
Yeah, of course.
Flunking out of school, all this kind of stuff, but it really did help me to recover. Having the basketball experience, and I'm still getting the feedback, so I apologize if my
no problem. That probably may be on our end, I'm not sure. But because we're getting some kind of resonance, which I'm not so unaccustomed to, having what someone referred to my voice as Barry Jones, a combination of Barry White and James Earl Jones. But let me devote this a little bit. You're talking about college in Indiana. What was coexistence like with the infamous Bobby Knight? If you could just give us some insight there.
Yeah, Coach Knight is, for anybody that's played for him or been associated with him, Coach Knight is a singularity, if you will. He's very challenging.
That's putting it out.
What he would do was beyond the physical work, and we worked hard. We did, at least the college level, you know, we were, Isaiah would often say, we understand that other teams work hard and practice and that kind of thing, but nobody works harder than we do. But where Coach was really challenging for some of us and for all of us in some respects is the mental aspects of it, because he would try to break you down like a Army drill sergeant, you know, mentally, and you know he would, you know, it was just very challenging, very difficult.
Oh my!
But it was also rewarding at a certain level, but it was definitely challenging.
You called him, you referred to him as singular, and that's probably putting it mildly. There are tales being woven even today, I'm sure, from some of his former players about the impact he had with them as humans, as people, as athletes, and sometimes as an entire persona. So I'm just kind of curious how you, as a freshman, would deal with that kind of mentality. Now, in the post-college years, what were your career ambitions?
Really, so I had a little break. So I went to Indiana. I transferred to Bradley the following year. Bradley, incidentally, won the NIT.
Sure did.
And then I met my first wife. She got pregnant, and so I left school altogether for a couple of years, and I was in the Navy. And after a brief stint there, I ended up at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, where I finished school. And so at that point, man, I had a family. So I was married, had children. I was just trying to make some money. So I worked for an insurance agency. I worked, and then eventually found myself at a bank in Jacksonville, Florida, and was in the HR department there for many years. And then I was approached after I was responsible for college recruiting for this bank, which is now Bank of America, and recruited a woman from the University of North Carolina campus, black woman who started a black student union, you know, exceptional candidate, and brought it back to the folks at the bank, and one of them, who was, let's say, Southern gentleman who was responsible for the investment team, said, well, she's kind of radical. I don't think we can use her. So I was prepared to quit at that point because I wrote a letter to the board. I wrote a letter to the executive committee that said, look, this is the best candidate I've come across, and this is the treatment that the students that I recruit are going to receive. And there's no place for me. You have these goals and quotas and all of these kinds of things. And so I sent the letter off before passing it on through my own, through my boss, through my chain of command. And I was ready to get fired. So the president of the bank trust company, Mike Baker, came to me and said, well, you have a little passion.
How about that?
I said, well, you know, I understand if you got to fire me. He says, well, no. So we're going to turn that passion into something else. He said, have you ever worked in the trust area before? I'm like, what is that? You know, I didn't have any idea what that was.
Is that some place where y'all just have confidence in folks or what? The trust area. Yeah, I love that job.
So, you know, I didn't know anything about money management or anything like that. So, you know, but I did see is that this little salary that I was getting, man, was very different than the income that was available on that side of the house.
How about that?
So I let them teach me. You know, Mike said, I will teach you everything that you need to know. And so that started my career on institutional investments. So I ended up working with primarily Florida clients at that point, but dealing with, you know, hospitals and counties and large for-profit corporations,
Sure.
and doing that kind of work for those types of entities, and eventually I ended up working in the bond markets, and my last stop was on the private equity side of things. So
Interesting.
I've had a job traveling the country dealing with, spent a lot of time in Texas because there's a lot of big money in Texas, mostly Austin though, because you've got all the state plans down there.
Right.
UTIMCO, trust, the state retirement systems, the employees and the teachers, and so
you were introduced to the finance, private equity firms, et cetera, at that stage of your career. I want you to hold that point right there. We're going to take a little break and we'll be right back.
All right, perfect.
Yes.
Edge Radio Network, where we have conscious conversation.
Edge is about love, relationships, and healing.
Edge Radio is for everyone and about everyone.
Edge is about working together.
Edge Radio is about recreating a beautiful body.
Edge is about community, synergy, and empowerment.
Edge is about being kind, compassionate, and loving to all.
And Edge Radio is about beauty and fashion.
各位观众 ，Edge Radio 是大家最好听的一个电台，不要忘记听哦。Yeah, I love Edge Radio. You can hear all about the topic and join us soon.
Edge is about being on the edge and not jumping. Yes.
When people stop talking to each other, society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters. Been feeling a little edgy lately? Listen to Edge Radio. That'll push you over the top. 1540 AM and 101.7 FM.
We work our whole lives to support our families. With one accident or illness, it can all be gone in an instant. Now there's a smart, affordable way to protect your family. Go to findhealthbenefits.com and discover low-cost life insurance for as little as $2 per month. Add to that a tax-deferred annuity that can help you protect your assets and grow your money for retirement. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. A critical illness strike without warning and wipe out your life savings. In fact, it's the reason for bankruptcy. Find Health Benefits offers an affordable solution. Get up to $50,000 if you get cancer, stroke, or a heart attack, giving you the peace of mind to focus on getting better while the plan helps you to pay your bills and medical expenses. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. 66% of seniors spend more time shopping for cable TV than Medicare plans. Most say because it's just too confusing. Laws change every year. The wrong plan could cost you thousands and prevent you from seeing the doctors you want. Introducing FindHealthBenefits.com. Save time, save money, see specialists without referrals. Go to FindHealthBenefits.com or call 877-235-6094 for this informative brochure.
Society is on the edge. Let's bring them back. Edge Radio, because truth still matters.
We work our whole lives to support our families. With one accident or illness, it can all be gone in an instant. Now there's a smart, affordable way to protect your family. Go to findhealthbenefits.com and discover low-cost life insurance for as little as $2 per month. Add to that a tax-deferred annuity that can help you protect your assets and grow your money for retirement. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. A critical illness strike without warning and wipe out your life savings. In fact, it's the reason for bankruptcy. Find Health Benefits offers an affordable solution. Get up to $50,000 if you get cancer, stroke, or a heart attack, giving you the peace of mind to focus on getting better while the plan helps you to pay your bills and medical expenses. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6094. 66% of seniors spend more time shopping for cable TV than Medicare plans. Most say because it's just too confusing. Laws change every year. The wrong plan could cost you thousands and prevent you from seeing the doctors you want. Introducing...
And we're back at 1540 AM and 101.7 FM on Edge Radio, where truth still matters. We were speaking with progressive social media commentator and PhD candidate Dr. Craig Bardell as we broke. And Doc, as we broke, you were recounting your beginning in the banking and finance business. But somewhere in there, you decided to pursue higher education, a PhD, as a matter of fact. Why now and why so urgently?
Right, so there's a theme in my life that has always that I've always come back to, which is I've had a view of injustice and those kinds of things always put before me, and without a seeming ability to address it. Right, so you go through life, you in the work situation, workplace, you see school situations, you see life in general, and there are these inequities that always crop up, and it always bothered me. Whether or not I was able to do anything about it, I was always saying something about it.
I see.
Right, so even in the work career, that example that I gave you with the trust company, with recruiting and those kinds of things, I've always been that guy. As I got older, though, and had to, my children were grown, I was looking for ways to deal with some of these injustices, and decided to do something. And this is after I'd gotten a master's degree to try to professionalize my education at the late age of 50. I'd never done the master's work and felt a certain way about it because I wasn't a great student. I wasn't an incapable student. I wasn't a great student, so I was like, I was shying away from this. But then I got exposed to a lot of people who were doing social justice work.
Sure.
While I was in school. So then I decided to go ahead and pursue the PhD back in 2015 when I finished my master's. And then all of these events started popping off, right?
Think about that.
So,
couldn't have been a better moment.
So I said, well, you know what? I'm still going to be 58 or 59 when I finish. But I'm going to be 59 or 58 when I finish. Or whether I didn't finish. So, decided to pursue it.
Well, what particularly are your research interests, and how did you arrive at it?
Yeah, so, and I'm still getting the feedback, so I apologize. I'm still
it's our problem, I think.
To formulate my thoughts, but so if I'm appearing halting, that's what it is.
No problem.
But my research interests are in what social scientists call precarity. And that is the vulnerabilities that people face as a result of poor workplace protections, the lack of a social safety net, all of those kinds of things that tend to affect people of color, black people, brown people in particular, Native Americans, in ways that the rest of the population don't experience. So that relates to precarity in housing, precarity in food security, precarity in income related to work or otherwise. And so one of the mythologies that we labor under as Americans is the idea that this is the greatest country in the world, we do it the best, etc.
Precisely.
Well, the data does not support that. There are European countries that have much more protections in terms of the kinds of basic things that people need to live. That they're not subject to being homeless. They're not subject to being without food, and they're certainly able to receive medical care in most developed nations. And so,
think about that.
The thing that is really driving a lot of the inequality has to do with the lack of social safety net and those kinds of things. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in. People have observed of late that there's a big wealth and income gap between the top rungs of society and below them.
Sure.
But they don't understand how it works, and so those are the kinds of questions that I'm interested in. And that's what my dissertation is involved in researching those types of topics.
That's a powerful vision and platform, but you mentioned something here about the greatest country in the world, that kind of thing. And so you're telling me, Doctor, we've been operating under some kind of illusion and reinforced bias that nobody does it better? I mean,
so my if I were interested as a young man in any subject, it was the idea of communication. Communication studies is what I earned my master's in, and particularly looking at things related to propaganda. And so, this is not a unique thing to me, but Americans are the most propagandized people on the face of the earth.
is that right?
For example, I gave you the example with regard to precarity. We think that we have the best situation and that kind of thing, and we don't. I mean, there are less developed countries in the United States that have far more protections and those kinds of things than we do, but we are socialized and we are indoctrinated to believe certain things that just aren't true.
Speaking of which, I know you've had some observations about current affairs socially always, so what's your impression of 2020 thus far?
Well, 2020 is kind of interesting. I've called, the COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, I call her Rona the Revealer.
Rona the Revealer. Why has that been labeled as such?
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
And how did you come to that label? I mean, what's behind that proposition?
Well, so many of the things that I talk about, people kind of dismiss for the coronavirus hit. For example, prior to the coronavirus becoming a thing here in the States, something like 40% of Americans could not put their hands on $400 in the event of an emergency.
Come on.
70% of Americans couldn't put their hands on $1,000. That's 70% of the population couldn't put their hands on $1,000 in the event of an emergency. So I think coronavirus sort of qualifies as an emergency, especially if you become unemployed. So Rona is revealing a lot of these things that people were either ashamed to admit or didn't want to talk about because it disrupted a narrative that people were more comfortable with.
Sure.
And it had been socialized to accept. And so Rona has revealed a number of things. For example, that the idea that deficits matter at the federal government level. When the government can just drop $6 trillion without sweating.
We're talking about a T here, with a T, with a T.
Businesses.
Yes.
And they can't afford to pay for your health care. There's no money available for Medicare for all. How are you going to pay for that? All that kind of narrative, that's a bunch of garbage.
Doc, let's repeat that one more time for the sake of the viewers. We're talking about with a T, right? We're not talking with billions.
Yes, that's the big number.
Is it just me, or for the many years that I've watched government, and I've watched politicians and the various programs and enactments, I don't recall that T word being thrown around as frequently as I've heard it recently. How about you?
And you've just not heard it, right? I mean, you hear about, every once in a while you'll hear about something like the military is unable to account for the Pentagon is unable to account for $1 trillion of its budgets over a decade or something like that. But it doesn't get thrown around very often.
My God. So we're living under these precarious conditions, a huge segment of the population, because of things rooted in history, things rooted in public policy, things rooted in just flat out greed and negligence. Am I getting close, Doc?
Oh, you're definitely getting close. I think you're all on top of it. I mean, so these kids are also pulling the blinders off of people in terms of the way that they're addressing some of these concerns about, well, it's we defund the police.
Yes.
That there's going to be chaos and that kind of thing. Well, police create chaos. They create criminality in a lot of respects. It's not that they don't on occasion do good work, but that's not what they were designed to do. They're designed to do exactly what they've done, which is to terrorize and to subject minority populations and the poor to a regime that disciplines them in the ways that the state deems fit. So the kids are saying, hey, look, defund this mess. Others are saying abolish. And I appreciate what they're saying. They're very good at what they're doing.
You're telling me that it would be an exception if they would protect and serve. That would be the exception, huh?
Well, they're protecting and serving the interests of capital. They're protecting and serving the parameters of whiteness and certain parameters of whiteness. But beyond that, that's they're not protecting and serving anything.
It's very curious. Can you explain, Doc, in a nutshell, the progressive agenda where elected politics are concerned and how it might be distinguished from typical left-leaning ideology?
Well, I don't know that I'm qualified to do that, but I can say that a number of different approaches to criticisms of capitalism it is what left and progressive people tend to critique. Some of them have different prescriptions, others have different analysis, offer different analysis, but the objective is really, at the heart of it, is dealing with what people refer to as the contradictions of capitalism.
Yes. Let's explore that a little bit now. For as long as we might recall, there has been a pernicious relationship between law enforcement and unarmed black citizens, particularly young black males, ending oftentimes in fatal encounters. Is it time for black folks to be armed and remain armed as a way of life?
Lock and load.
Lock and load.
Lock and load.
Hashtag return fire. All right.
Return fire. Yes, sir.
Wow. I know that you're following this upcoming election and the opposing nominees. Got a question for you. Is Joe Biden an adequate enough opponent to merit a high black turnout?
Well, so I'm going to get in folks' feelings about this. Joe Biden is probably the last person that merits the support of black people. Joe Biden was responsible for the promotion of one of the most harmful things to black people since the end of slavery, and that is the 1994 crime bill, where he demonized black men as thugs and criminals on the Senate floor in the promotion of this bill that is largely responsible for the era of mass incarceration. He's also responsible, just in terms of his own speech related to black folks. He, in the debate, he talked about, when he was asked about reparations for black folks, he was talking about playing records because black folk don't know how to raise their children. Play them words, play records. Let them hear words. You know, just a number of different things. In terms of, you know, we just talked about the idea of defunding the police, for example. He's like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to add $300 billion to police budgets. And so when you talked about the history of policing and black folks, there are three origins of policing in America. It's not a universal thing. This policing idea was never a universal idea. The slave patrols in South Carolina, all men had to were enlisted in the patrols to make sure that black folk were not getting together, because this is just after the Haitian Revolution.
I see.
Where the slaves had gotten together in Bois-Cayman and overthrown the ruling elite there. They were terrified in Charleston, South Carolina, the only explicitly slave state in the among the colonies at that point, and so they were terrified, and so they set up slave patrols. American policing comes from that tradition. It also comes from the tradition of the Texas Rangers, who were something that you should be familiar with there in Houston. The purpose of the Rangers was to clear land for white settlers. So they were clearing the land of the indigenous populations and the Mexican population that had been there prior to them. So that's what the history of the Texas Rangers is. So that's another origin spot. And the third origin spot for policing in America was the busting up of labor unions. So you had the Chinese rail workers who tried to organize themselves.
Yes.
And the Pinkertons were brought in. They had the same kind of thing happen in Pennsylvania. So those are the origins of American police. So you've got Joe Biden, who has determined that not only is he wanting to promote mass incarceration of black folks, for which he has still not apologized. He's offered no apology for that.
None whatsoever.
He wants to add $300 million to these budgets, and so he's adding insult to injury. So he's I think perhaps only Michael Bloomberg would be more insulting. You know, who was the promoter of stop and frisk, even until the year that he decided to run. So I have pretty strong feelings about Joe Biden.
Interesting. I can tell. So you're telling me this entire concept of American policing, in the words of a Baptist preacher, it was born in sin and shaped in iniquity, huh?
Exactly.
My. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, there's this acronym that's garnering a lot of play socially. It's called ADOS. Can you define that acronym, ADOS, and why it has special significance?
Right. So, American Descendants of Slavery is what the acronym stands for, and it's a concept put together by Yvette Carnell, a social commentator, and Antonio Moore, who is a lawyer in Los Angeles, and so they both looked at the idea that America owes black folks, right? And they owe a particular set of black folks, those that have a lineage of enslavement here in America, in particular. Those that have suffered those ongoing legacies that are what Saidiya Hartman calls the afterlives of slavery.
Wow. Meaning
the convict leasing, lynching, Jim Crow, the enduring effects of the way that the federal FHA started, which was explicitly racist, redlining, and so all of these segregation efforts that were not as much, the idea that they wanted to. What segregation is really is a segregation of resources and access to the ability to thrive.
As opposed to segregation of people, as opposed.
That's correct.
Yes. Well, Speaking of
So
reparations,
that's who the ADOS folks are representing. There's a whole debate between them and because they're also anti-Pan-Africanists, so that's another aspect of what they are
I see.
about in terms of. So they don't believe that they have this idea that Africans and Caribbeans will come here and do better than we do, than black folks that are born here do. So that they have a certain critique there that is being pushed back by other folks like Dr. Jared Ball and a good friend of mine whose father is involved in this, Dr. Ray Winbush, both of those gentlemen at Morgan State, and others who see this as kind of a conservative approach. The ADOS approach is a conservative approach. So I'll probably talk more than you wanted me to talk about that.
No, not at all. But speaking of reparations, not long ago there was a French discussion, if you will, and it's somehow finding its voice in the mainstream media right now, and more frequently. Can you tell us why and if you think it's valid?
We start with the validity first. It's absolutely valid. I mean, America has always paid reparations to different groups.
So this is no new thing. This is no new thing.
They paid reparations to Jews. They paid reparations to slave owners.
Wow.
Who lost their property. America has paid, and I think the last person just died recently who was a recipient of that effort to reimburse slave owners for the loss of their quote unquote property. So to suggest that black folk have not been harmed by the ongoing traumas that we see, and are not due to be restored as a result of that is a travesty. And so now what's happening is Rona the Revealer has ripped off the scabs of these things. So people put forward these tropes. Well, if you would just work hard, if you would just stay out of jail, if you would, not do drugs, if you would, a number of things that place the burden of responsibility on black folks. If you would not do these things, then you would not be harmed.
Interesting.
And then you would experience the American dream is an absolute lie. And it has been exposed for that. And so now people are beginning to say, hey, look, you need to repair this. You all need to fix this. And so there's a lot of energy, but it hasn't happened because there's more resistance to it than there's energy for it in support of it. Because the powers that be have a vested interest in putting that kind of talk down.
But at some point it becomes a price of peace, does it not? I mean, I've maintained for some time now that there is probably nothing black folks can do unilaterally to reach parity or to reach equality. That idea, yes.
Yeah, so there are a number of conversations, and among the conversations that black folks have even advanced is this idea that, black capitalism, that we're going to, if we would just collectively pool our resources, that we would be able to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and everything. But black people are the only people that have ever been subjected to capitalism. Everybody else has gotten subsidies.
Interesting.
So it's that black capitalism is not a way to do this, and you're right. There's Frantz Fanon, the Martinique French trained psychiatrist who wrote the book The Wretched of the Earth.
Wretched of the Earth.
Talks about the idea that the way that settler colonies manage peace is through communication. So they'll promote certain things. They'll distract you with entertainment. They will give you the trinkets and baubles of society, so that you get a certain thing that kind of distracts you. But right now, I think we're beyond that. People have blown past those distractions to see, hey, there's some real harm done here, and it's completely exposed. by Rona the Revealer, and so
I love that phrase.
you're right. I mean, so
I love
there
that
is a
term.
lack of peace as a result of
Yes.
some of these inequities that have existed for forever. So,
Well, hold on to that thought, Doc. Hold on to that
agree with you on
thought.
that.
We're going to take a small break and we'll be right back.
This is former Rocket Robert Reed,
This is Mel Jewell of Athletes United.
and we want to talk to you about our new program and podcast. We're talking about former athletes who are doing a lot of things in the community.
Various athletes in various sports. Swimming, track, soccer, football, baseball, you name it.
Former and current athletes here in the greater Houston area.
All promoting wellness, health. All promoting that which makes us all better.
Of Edge Radio, truth still matters.
We work our whole lives to support our families. With one accident or illness, it can all be gone in an instant. Now there's a smart, affordable way to protect your family. Go to findhealthbenefits.com and discover low-cost life insurance for as little as $2 per month. Add to that a tax-deferred annuity that can help you protect your assets and grow your money for retirement. Learn more. Go to findhealthbenefits.com or call 877-235-6090.
This is former Rocket Robert Reed.
This is Mel. And we're back once again at 1540 AM and 101.7 FM on Edge Radio, where truth still matters. We're speaking again with progressive social media commentator and PhD candidate Dr. Craig Bardo. And as we broke, Doc, I had a question in mind for you. It's been kind of, I guess, a point of contention with me. It's an unsettling kind of outcome. We've heard about economic disparity studies pointing out the difference in the net worth of black homes versus white in various parts of the country to date. Can you give us an example of any recent findings?
Oh, there's a number of studies, and authors such as Robert Shapiro, who wrote the book The Color of Law, describes how these disparities are the result of federal policy. They're the result of state policy and local policy that include racial covenants and those kinds of things that prohibit black folks from moving into certain neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. There's still some of those covenants, even though they've been determined to be not legally enforceable by the Supreme Court in 1972. They're still in the books in Missouri and in some homeowners associations. So rather than addressing the housing in particular, though, I think one thing that may highlight the difference that you're trying to get at is a recent Federal Reserve Board policy study, or Federal Reserve Bank study in the city of Boston, where they found that the median wealth of a white family in Boston is somewhere around $240,000. The median wealth of a black family, the average black family in Boston, is $8.
Wait a minute, Doc. Wait. Hold on. Stop. That has to be a typo or something.
Not 80, not 800, not 8,000, $8.
80.
No, 8. EIGHT.
Jesus.
Singular 8.
Jesus.
Less than $10.
We're talking economic disparity here, are we not?
That's a disparity.
Epic proportions. This is real.
It's not an accident. It's not an accident. I mean, people will talk about the fact, white people will talk about the fact that, well, I didn't own slaves. But but the entire wealth regime in America is based on on blackness. So in other words, the blackness is a place to extract value from, and to diminish, and in order for white capital to accumulate. And so even poor white folks are still able to benefit from, to some degree or another, not entirely, but to benefit from the presence of blackness. That's how it works. And the closer in proximity white folks are to black, the less likely they are to be able to accumulate wealth and to experience the kinds of disparity that you're mentioning, and the kinds of legal and juridical problems that black people experience.
That is just a devastating statistic there, Doc. I mean, we're talking 2020. This is 2020, correct?
2020.
And that's not a typographical error.
That is not a typographical error. In fact, the study was conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston by Dr. Sandy Darity, who was also a proponent of ADOS, by the way. Duke University, the head of the Department of Economics there, the Cook Center, and Dr. Derek Hamilton, who is the he's actually moving back to New York, and I forget, I'm losing the name of it. He used to be affiliated with Columbia University, but he's one of the leading economics experts with regard to what they call stratification economics. So I know Dr. Hamilton, he's one that led the study. So this is not a typo, and they've done these studies all over the country. They've done the studies in Miami and in Los Angeles. I think they also did something in Tulsa so that they can include indigenous populations as well in the study to see where these disparities exist, and they're pretty consistent throughout the country. I mean, there's no place in the country where black people are on parity with white people. There's just no place in the country where that exists.
Well, it's quite explanatory. Listen, I'm going to get a couple questions in here. In 2016, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton lost a key swing state called Wisconsin. We all remember that. A lot of black Milwaukeeans stayed home and were likely the culprit in that particular race. Is the 2020 DNC and or Biden taking too much grant there as well?
I think so. That's a good catch there, and I think that so it wasn't just Milwaukee where it was in particular black men sat home. Black men sat home in St. Louis. They sat home in Milwaukee. They sat home in North Carolina. They sat home in Florida.
Wow.
They did not vote in these swing states. And when they were surveyed and asked about it, the challenge that they had was that, look, there was a lot of hope and promise associated with the Obama presidency that did not materialize in a way that benefited black men in particular. They were still being harmed. They were still being policed. And they were able to determine that this is just not in their best interest. And so when you had Hillary Clinton come along, who was offering to do less and wasn't black, and was also part of that same kind of demonization of black men, talking about calling us super predators and those kinds of issues, those kinds of things, again without apology. They sat home. And so I think what the Biden campaign has realized is that they're not going to get those folks. So if you look at, they're still not going to get those folks to turn out. The black men that were interviewed looked at the results of what the Trump presidency has done, and they said we still wouldn't vote for Hillary.
Wow.
They're not supporting Trump. They're saying we're not going to vote for Hillary. But what I think Biden is doing is he says, look, I'm not going to get these guys anyway, so I'm going to go for the Amy Cooper vote, the white liberal vote that is got a racial tinge to it. They're also going to go. They've also put a lot of effort into going after Republicans, disaffected Republicans. So they have leaned heavily into. So they're not looking at things that are going to benefit black folks like Medicare for all. They're not looking at at the social safety net programs that would benefit black people generally. They're looking to do more policing, leaning into those kinds of things. So I think that they have foregone any opportunities or any effort to go after these folks. They're rather going after. They're following up the old Republican
playbook.
voters and trying to track them down as a path to victory. So I think that they've just said no, we're not going to even bother with these folks.
It's a mistake. In your opinion, is it a fool's errand for ADOS to follow the logic of voting blue no matter who?
I think it's a big problem, personally. I mean, I understand the idea, but so you're a little older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So you remember
we didn't have to mention
how
that.
Goldwater was the individual. I mean, they had atomic bomb pictures going off, right?
Sure.
About Goldwater.
Sure.
Reagan was the end of the earth, end of the world.
Yes.
Bush was the end of the world. Bush 2 was the end of the world. W was the So this is a playbook, and so what's happened is that the Democrats have gone further and further to the right with these approaches, trying to, they're really trying to capture that old Republican vote more than they're trying to deal with any progressive agenda that would benefit black folks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, can you shed some light on this notion of black-on-black crime and why that is, something of a misnomer?
Yeah, well, so people commit crimes around who they live with, who they work with, that kind of thing. That's where quote-unquote crime is committed. So most of the crime in America is white on white.
I just want you to touch on that.
Because white folks live and work around white folks, right?
I just wanted you to touch on that.
What you see as a media scholar, so what I see is that several studies that have demonstrated that the presence of black crime in the media is far overrepresented in terms of its actual occurrence. In other words, black crime doesn't happen nearly as much as what you see on television.
I wanted you to point on that. I just wanted you to...
In movies and those kinds of things.
Just
but it serves a certain narrative, and so it's a complete... It's a trope. It's an idea that says, hey, black folks, black men in particular, are the thugs and brutes and criminals. And it's been that way since the Emancipation Proclamation.
I just need you to touch on that, Doc. But listen, lastly, we've strung together quite a few topics here and cited different authorities on this and that. But if you just had one shot at correct person B,
T'Challa from the Black Panther?
Well, that is the wrong answer. But we are so grateful to have you here today, and that's our show, folks. Thanks to progressive social media commentator Dr. Craig Bardo for a provocative hour, and as your host, Vic Mel, and on behalf of our host, Bobby Joe Reed, we're asking you to join us again next week for another experience of Athletes United on Edge Radio, where truth still matters.
Are you a small business owner concerned about the downturn in the economy? Top business leaders like Mattress Mac and Warren Buffett will tell you that now is the time to promote your business more than ever. People need your services. Your business needs an edge. Learn about special advertising packages for small businesses right here on Edge Radio. Find out more, give us a call at 281-744-0446. That's 281-744-0446. Edge, because truth still matters.
We work our whole lives to support our families.